Good morning, Illini. Welcome back to Healthy Illini Podcast. I'm glad you're here. I'm your host, as always, Matt Schrock, and we're excited to have you here. We have a repeat guest today, and that's always fun for me to have somebody come back on the program that we've had before. But when we talk about wellness, we talk about a lot of the aspects of our wheel of wellness, and it can be mental, it can be physical, emotional, but financial is one part of that, and it's an important part of that. And so we're going to continue some of our financial discussion today. And so I'm excited to have you be here, and I hope you're listening and tracking what we're saying, because this is going to be some really valuable information today. I'm joined again, as I said, by a repeat guest. Sterling Rasky is a senior lecturer here with Geese College of Business in the Department of Finance. It's his third time on the program. If you go back in our archives, and I highly encourage you to do that. If you go back and look back in episode 90 in November of 23, we did Investing 101, Building a Strong Financial Future. And then later in May 24, episode 113 was Vacation Planning and Budgeting. And today, Sterling has come to talk to us about credit cards. Sterling, thanks for being here.
Thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
I love having you on the program, not just because you're a great guest and you're so easy to talk to, but I always learn something myself. That's kind of the fun thing, where I'm reminded of things sometimes, and it's always one of my privileges of hosting this program is that I get to be the listener. I get to be the learner on the other side too, and it's so valuable and so much fun for me, and that learning never stops. Right. I'm a strong proponent of lifelong learning, and we know that we can talk about the days when we were in high school, and they're completely different now. Everything is different now, so you've got to keep learning how to adjust and learning how to interact and things like that. And so, as a college student, when you're in a university or a college or whatever it may be, you do a lot of learning in the classroom. Obviously, that's a major part of it. Mm-hmm. But you'll learn a whole lot outside of the classroom too, about who you are, about how the world works, about how to navigate things. And so while that classwork is extremely important for your career, understanding how to navigate life outside of that career is also incredibly important. And as I said in the intro, financial health is a big part of that, and financial literacy is a huge part of that, because when you're a college student, you're stepping out on your own first time, you've got your own finances, you're in charge of your own finances, which is two separate conversations. The money you make and how you use it are two separate things. But you're starting to learn how to budget. We've talked about that, and paying bills and things like that. But the other area that you step into that you may not have much experience with is the world of credit. I know whenever I was a freshman on campus, one of the first things I ran into, somebody said, "Hey, sign up for this credit card." And I was like, I don't even know what that really means, but I'm okay, whatever. It has a cool picture on it. I want that card, that kind of thing. And credit cards can be wonderful. They can be a wonderful tool. They can be a slightly tricky thing for a lot of students, and it's just understanding how to use them wisely. Mm-hmm. So to start this conversation, let's assume the listener knows very little about credit cards and how they function. And so if you would just start there and kind of just give some basic ideas on things to know when you're thinking about getting a credit card. What are some important terms, things like that? And I'll speak from experience.
I don't know if I should admit this on air. In my experience, some good things to look for are first asking the question, is this something I really need? Is it a must? I think, could a person get by in life without a credit card? Absolutely. Is it a convenience? You bet. It's a wonderful tool. I think it's a great tool if used correctly. Part of that is, and we'll probably get into this a little bit more, but part of using it correctly is understanding that you are borrowing money, so it does have to be paid back. So one of the first things to think about is, well, if I use this, do I have the money to purchase whatever it is I'm contemplating purchasing, or is this really a want? And I want instant gratification, but how the heck am I going to take care of this or pay for it later on?
I think that's an important place to start, because a credit card is not a debit card. Right. With a debit card, you have the funds in an account, and you're pulling those funds out. With a credit card, like you said, you're borrowing. It's not something that you have. You have a credit allowance, but you don't have the money per se in that card. You're taking it from another account to pay into that card to pay it off.
Right.
And so that's an important thing to understand. With the idea of how a credit card functions, is that you are borrowing. With that borrowing, it's something important is something called interest. Mm-hmm. If I borrow $5 from you and I come back tomorrow like, hey, here's your $5 back, odds are you're not going to be like, I need a little extra on top of that as an interest. But a credit card is different. Would you explain interest rates and kind of what that means?
So with a credit card, you are borrowing money, and Ideally, aspirationally, if and when a person uses a credit card, and I tell this to my students all the time ad nauseum, it just before any contemplated purchase, I would recommend, if the money's not in your checking or savings account, probably don't purchase it. There are some outliers and extenuating circumstances. If you do use the credit card, just pay it off every month, and you don't have to worry about any interest. Where interest comes into play is generally after the bill comes in, and if a person doesn't pay off that credit card amount, the full amount. So if I use my credit card and the bill comes in and I owe a total of $500. If I pay $250, the remaining $250 is going to be subject to the interest rate on the borrowed money that I still owe the credit card company for using their credit, using their money. And those interest rates can be pretty high, on average between 18 and 25%. So we had talked a little bit earlier, what's the best interest rate for a credit card? And I would say 0 if you pay it off every month. I've seen some, and this is rare, in the single digits, below 10%, but on average you're looking at 18 to 25%. But again, none of that applies if it's paid off every month.
And you know, and that's a big, because you're right. The idea that you use it and then you pay it off, there are ways to do that and navigate it, and it's not that dangerous. But if you do have a purchase that comes up that you do have to use it for, and you know, in my own life, we have some that we use kind of as emergency kind of things at times, because our credit allowance is higher than sometimes what we have in the bank at the moment. Like I may be getting paid on Wednesday, but I need something on Monday, you know, like, and when I say need, like groceries or something like that I know I can pay it off later, but I'm using this right now. And so that's where you get that balance of you try and figure it out. But it is important to know what that rate is for interest when you go into it. And like you said, 18 to 25 is kind of a typical one. So that I wanted to ask that question, because if somebody's listening, they're like, I don't even know if this is a good rate or not. So if you're under that 18, if you're in single digits, that's a great rate. Right. You know, that's a great thing to look at. If you're looking at the 25, you're on the high end, and maybe you need to look somewhere else and see, you know, maybe I can pull that down, that kind of idea. And that's where that can play a big part in that. So, you know, if you would share a little bit about, you know, we talked about the best uses of it in the prep a little bit. If you would share a little bit, like, and again, this is coming from your experience and from your perspective, but what are some of the purchases that you say, you know what, these are good uses of it in here? This is kind of where I'd say, you know, that's not a bad idea to use a credit card on that kind of thing.
Yeah, that's a great question. For me, I have 2 credit cards. I have one personal and one business. So the business one gets used strictly for business. If I'm traveling, hotel rooms, Uber, meals out. So it's very convenient. And in a short month's time, it looks like I've spent, if I'm traveling a lot in a particular month, holy cow, this balance is huge. But knowing full well it's going to get paid off at the end of the month, or I should say when the bill comes in. So it's very convenient to use that. If something happens to where there's a dispute, I have found that credit card companies are usually really good to work with. When I say dispute, there's been an extra charge on my card that I didn't authorize. Perhaps somebody stole my information. That's happened before, and I was able to call in, get a new card issued, and get the situation taken care of. From a business perspective, tracking expenses, so I can take a look at, okay, business expenses, let me put these down if I'm doing my taxes, if I need to account for different things, if I'm getting reimbursed from certain individuals, I can have an accounting for that. So it's very much a convenience, a little bit of accounting, and also just the protection. I've used credit cards when traveling out of the country, and they've been very convenient, very easy to use, very easy to get access to cash in the country's currency that I've been using. So for that, they're a wonderful, wonderful tool.
Yeah, and you don't have to carry all that cash with you. You know, you're trying to. There is some convenience to that as well. Is there anything that you would say? You know, like, I know a lot of people use credit cards for these types of purchases, but probably steer clear of that if it's at all possible.
I know a guy who did this once. I'll speak from personal experience. The first credit card I got, they took me hook, line, and sinker. I had like a $5,000 limit, and I thought I had arrived. It wasn't a gold card per se, but it was colored gold. Right. And I remember thinking, you know, 18, 19 years old, you know, here I am. So I mean, I used it all the time. Oh yeah. And it was more of a bragging when, I'll take care of this, I'll pay this. So paying for people's drinks, people's meals, probably not the best idea. I don't see a problem personally paying for meals or paying for gas or things that you might need, as long as it gets paid off. The problem that I had on this first one is I overspent. I just didn't have the money elsewhere. And rather than saying, hey, guys, friends, I can't swing it, and saying no, unfortunately, I didn't do that.
We're going to come back to that idea of what happens if you get a little outside yourself on that. We'll talk about that in a minute. But, the baseline of this is kind of the same conversation we had with the vacation planning, that it comes down to preparation and understanding and budgeting and knowing, because like you said, if you know you're going to have the money and you're going to pay it off and you have it budgeted for this, using that convenience, it's not that big of a deal if you take care of it. It's when you don't have a plan and you find yourself just kind of throwing it around, or it's, that's tomorrow's problem. That's tomorrow me's problem, or at the end of the month's me's problem. Right now, I'm not worried about that, and that can get you in trouble real quick too. And at the end of the month, you is really not happy with current you, that kind of thing. So it comes back to that preparation and just being intentional with how you use it. Now, with this, the other aspect of a credit card that I wanted to kind of bring up and ask about the importance of it is your credit score. We hear you hear credit score all the time. If you watch TV at all, you see commercials about check your credit score,
Right.
But as an 18, 19, starting off young adult, you don't really know what a credit score is or why it's important. Would you just share a little bit about how that's tied to credit cards and kind of why that has any weight on somebody's life?
Right. So with a credit score, it's essentially a numerical score of my character. It's not a judge of my personal character, I don't think, but it's really a numerical way for a company or a potential future creditor, lender, to judge you as how worthy is Sterling going to be paying his bills on time if we are to extend him credit, if we are going to give him a loan. So, for example, a home loan, a mortgage, a vehicle loan, even a credit card, they're going to look at my score, and if it's up 720 and higher, chances are I'm probably going to get the financing at a decent interest rate. So circling back to interest rates, there's a relationship there. The better somebody's credit score, the lower the interest rate they're going to pay, simply because they're a lower risk to the lender. So 720 and above is going to be a decent score. The highest somebody can get is 850, and I don't worry about trying to. There are some people that I know that are like, oh, he's got to keep it at 850. And I'm like, I've got better things to do with my time. So the credit score is basically, there's 5 components. The biggest component that goes into the credit score, and I can't remember the exact percent, maybe 36% of the score is made up of just paying your bills on time that you have of outstanding loans, mortgage payments, car payment, credit card payment, and so forth. Credit utilization is going to come into the mix. So what of the outstanding credit that somebody has, what's it going for? Is it for education? Is it for a mortgage? Is it 5 credit cards? So that can impact the score. The number of accounts that are open, how long they've been open, so your credit history as far as the how long you've had credit available. And there's a few more that I'm forgetting. They're not coming right off the top of my head, but those are some of the basics to inquiries. So if I apply for a mortgage, it might ding my score a little bit, but most of the credit bureaus, TransUnion, Equifax, Experian, they're going to look at that and say, okay, the person's shopping for a mortgage. We get that. That's a normal thing. It's not going to kill somebody's score. If I'm applying for a credit card, that's a hard inquiry. That's going to drop my score a little bit. And just word to the wise for listeners, if you apply for a credit card and you get denied, stop. Unfortunately, I had a former student that came to me after the fact, and he's like, I'm just a little bit confused. I've applied for 5 credit cards and I keep getting denied. And I'm like, okay, I'm glad you told me. Let's pump the brakes and let's find out why you're being denied and go from there. So it's usually a great time to stop and go, okay, what's going on, and let me see what I need to do to fix this.
And I asked the question about credit score, not because I want to go deep dive now going forward on it, because we're talking more about credit cards on this, but just to kind of highlight that it is related, and that the choices you make with credit cards can affect your credit score, which can affect lending later on, like when you want to get a house or you want to get a car even, or something like that. And in those instances, the interest rate that you get are going to be very important, because like you said, with a credit card, you can pay it off at the end of the month. Great. I'm not going to be able to take out a mortgage on my on a house and then pay it off at the end of the month.
Right.
I mean,
Right.
you're going to have that interest rate have an impact. It's going to be a factor. And so understanding now what you do in the small things and take care of the credit cards and things like that, that will have a greater impact later on. Understanding that early on, because I didn't know that when I was coming into it. I was like, oh, this is now and again, I'll deal with that when I'm older. Right. Having no idea, really having no concept of what I'm doing now is going to affect what's going to happen in 10, 15 years kind of thing. And so that's kind of why I wanted to have that conversation, just to highlight that the discussion we're having about cars right now can play into other things later on. Now, with that, I don't, because my next question is going to feed into this, but I want to make a little bit of clarification before. This is not a conversation to scare anybody. This is not this is a bad thing and you need to get scared straight, because I'm going to ask you next about what happens when you do get it out, get out of your control. I don't want this to sound like, okay, we told you a little about cars, now this is why they're bad. It's not that. I just want to make sure, because for a lot of people, when they get into a tight situation, they just don't know what to do. They don't know where to go. And hopefully whoever's listening doesn't ever get into that situation, but I would rather have the conversation and have some tools presented than just kind of pretend like it doesn't happen. So the next part of it is, like you said, credit cards can be great. They can be useful. They're convenient. There are great ways to use them if you plan and you budget and you take care of it. But it can be easy to find yourself overwhelmed. You may be in a situation where you suddenly have an employment change and you have to rely on a card for a little bit to kind of bridge the gap. Or, for whatever reason, you have a purchase that's a little bit bigger than what you are right now, so you have to spread it out in a monthly kind of thing. And that's okay, but it can overwhelm and it can snowball, especially with interest rates and things like that. So what does somebody do if they find themselves behind the eight ball and it's just kind of, they can't quite catch up, or they're in a position where they've maxed out a card or maxed out a couple cards and they're kind of in a tough financial situation? What options are there for somebody that finds themselves in that position?
Yeah, and if you don't mind, I'll speak from personal experience. So going back to the first card that I got, I think I had a $5,000 limit, and it was probably within 45 seconds I nearly reached the max on it. It wasn't that fast, but it was within a couple of weeks.
They can feel that fast.
Maybe a month. Yeah, I mean, it was really, really quick. At the time, it was making the payments on time, but then the credit card company lowered my available credit. So I think I had pushed it up. I'd spent like $4,500 on a $5,000 limit. They lowered my available credit to $4,000, so I was $500 over, which penalized me, extra money to pay, and they can't do that anymore. I think it was the Card Act of 2009 that now prohibits some of those unscrupulous practices. So at the time, again, do as I say, not as I did. I thought, well, I'm going to stick it to them. I just won't pay it. Well, that was just the worst thing in the world to do. So finding myself behind the eight ball, for me, it was like, okay, this is a problem. I need to make sure I get it fixed. The first thing I did was I called the credit card company. I said, hey, I owe you money. How do I make it right? And I'm assuming they probably don't hear that a lot, because you could have probably pushed the lady over on the other end of the line with a feather. There was just silence for about 10 or 15 seconds, and she was kind of stumbling, and she was really, really nice, and they worked with me, and I was able to get the debt that I owed, because it was my debt. It was my responsibility. I was able to get that paid off and taken care of, probably, I think, over the next 6 or 8 months to come clean. It did. Not making the payments and falling behind did damage my credit. So that, and that's that long-term repercussion that I didn't think about when I first got the card. That was probably 4 or 5 years before that was completely clean on my record, and my credit score looked a lot better.
Yeah, it's one of those things. It's way easier to knock it down than to build it back up.
Yeah.
It just is. It's just the nature of it. But like you said, reaching out and asking. And that's a tough position to be in, because nobody wants to have that. It's an uncomfortable conversation. Yeah. It's an uncomfortable position to be in. You don't really know what to do, and sometimes it's just like, I'm just not going to deal with it, because it's just that's not the proper route to go on it. The other thing is, when you're going to that conversation, it's important to understand that credit cards are often willing to work with you because they would rather get something than nothing.
Right.
And that's what you're trying to do. You're like, look, I don't have X amount, but I have this much of it, and I can do this much of it. And they're like, okay, let's work with that. And in my own experience, same thing. I've found where there's times where you just get kind of in a tight spot, they're willing to have that conversation with you. And so if you do get in that jam, if you're listening and you're kind of in that jam, reach out, ask, and they will work with you. The other side of that, and this is kind of where I want to bring the conversation to, is if you don't know, if you don't know what to do, you're like, I don't know who to ask, I don't know where to go, or I don't know how to plan for this, or I don't know how to prepare for this. What are some resources that people can reach out to if they're a student here on campus, or even if not? What are some places to learn about these things, or to ask questions, or to get some of that financial help?
Yeah, and I say this respectfully. Contact me. I'm happy to help out. If you're a student at the university, even if you're not, reach out to me, shoot me an email. I'm happy to help. If I can, I'll make the time, because I've been in that situation. Who do I talk to? I don't want to really talk to my family. I don't want to talk to parents because there could be a little a feeling of shame there, and feeling embarrassed. So just somebody that you might trust. Hey, I find myself a little bit in this situation. There's financial counselors out there that may be available just to provide some questions to ask. That I don't know if this would necessarily be for free, but contacting maybe a financial advisor, just even if it's a financial advisor of a parent, and calling that person up and asking him or her, I'm in a little bit of a jam. Do you have any ideas, any recommendations? Is there somebody to talk to? Even just a normal therapist or a counselor can also provide some insight and at least help alleviate a little bit of that anxiety of not knowing what to do.
And then there are places like, credit unions and things like that do like consolidation of debt, and they can help with that. But again, you don't know until you've asked.
Right.
You don't know what you don't know. So if you're listening here, we'll have Sterling's email in the bio if you want to reach out to him. But you can reach out to us. We'll help direct traffic in that. And it's just asking the questions. And we were talking off air a little bit that it can be helpful to get wisdom from others who have gone through it, so you don't have to go through it yourself. And that's kind of what we're here for. We're both talking about we have wisdom in this area that we kind of I wish I didn't have, and I'm sure you didn't have necessarily, but we learned from it. And so if we can help direct somebody else in another direction and help them navigate it without falling into some of the pitfalls, we're happy to do that. That's what we're here for. On that. And again, it's not a bad thing. It's a tool that can be used. You just got to learn how to use the tool, just like any other tool that you have. So, Sterling, thank you so much for sharing today. I mean, it always goes so fast when I get to chat with you, but just really great information on this, and understanding a baseline of how to start with credit cards and how to navigate some of that and figure out where it's going. So, thank you so much for just taking the time and chatting with me today.
It's my pleasure. Thanks for having me back.
When you're in a university, you're learning a lot in the classroom, but you're also learning a lot outside the classroom. And as we said, financial literacy is huge for starting off on your journey into your adulthood, into a career, into family, whatever it may be. And there's a lot there, and if you don't know, you just don't know. And so it's one of those things you got to ask. It's not always an easy ask, but it's an important ask. So if you have questions, if you want to know more about how to navigate anything with credit cards, or just starting off with budgeting and finances and things like that, reach out to us here at Healthy Illini. We'd love to get in contact with you. We'd love to chat with you. Reach out to Sterling. Reach out to other people here on campus that have experience on that. We're here on campus because we like helping students. That's why we're here. And so we want to help you with that. We want to walk with you in this and just see you thrive in whatever you're doing. But thank you for joining us today. You're on a personal journey no matter where you are in it. You are important and you matter. Your health and wellness are important and matter, and we're here to keep you well to excel. So go have a great week, Illini. Let us know how you're doing, and we'll catch you next time on Healthy Illini.